are going to begin the evening, however, not with the candidates, but with a special guest. Now, I know everybody's expecting Faisal Khan. Unfortunately, he ended up having to fly to New York. I tried to stop his airplane, but that didn't work. So he sent his avatar, who is Michael Graham. So Michael, it's yours.
So thank you very much. As you mentioned, Faisal wasn't able to be here today. My name is Michael Graham. I'm the general counsel for Project 6. We're a nonprofit organization based here in Chicago that focuses on government ethics. So it's an easy time right now to be asked to give a spiel on government ethics or oversight. I think whether you're talking about the local, the county, the state, the national, or even kind of at the cultural level with the ongoing reckoning with sexual harassment, I think everyone in this room can point to a system of accountability that's failed, or a person who was in a position of authority or power whose personal integrity failed. And worse yet, I think everyone in this room knows firsthand how those failures can erode confidence in systems that we rely on, whether that be in your schools, in your workplace, or in your government. This current cultural climate, though, also makes it easier to talk about some aspects of government ethics that are a little bit more difficult to get to normally. Specifically, I'd like to highlight the current Me Too movement and the particular relevancy I think it has to a discussion on government ethics. So one of the most striking aspects of the Me Too movement is the longevity of the problems that it's seeking to address. Issues like sexual harassment in the workplace or the wage gap, these aren't new problems. They're old problems. They're so old, actually, that they were normalized in some situations. Unacceptable behaviors were so commonplace in some instances that even good-intentioned people who were in the thick of it failed to appreciate the true scope of the problems that Me Too seeks to address. And from that normalcy comes something worse, something more invidious. The systems that are meant to protect people from harassment, things like HR departments and the legal system, were in some instances co-opted by things like settlement agreements attached to non-disclosure agreements to actually perpetuate problems that they were supposed to help solve. And probably most importantly, we shouldn't forget that whenever the Me Too movement began picking up steam, it wasn't the people who were already empowered to implement changes that started the conversation. It was actually people on the opposite end. It was women and other people who had faced harassment, their friends, families, and loved ones, and the average person who started hearing these stories and said, that's wrong. I don't support that. I don't want to participate in a system like that. So these three themes, the normalization of problematic behaviors, the co-opting of systems of oversight, and the inability of those in power to have the moral perspective to find real solutions, seems to me to have a lot of relevancy in a discussion about government ethics. Now, with those things in mind, we don't have time tonight to go through the Illinois ethics statute and determine where we think it's strong or weak or missing, or where it's a mere Band-Aid over a much bigger problem that's not being addressed. Instead, we at Project 6 think that a lot of the issues that arise in the topic of government ethics could be resolved if our elected officials internalized three simple concepts: accountability, integrity, and transparency. Now, those are easy to say. The question is, what do they mean, and what does it look like when they fail? So let's go through them real quickly. Accountability means that you support and empower systems that ensure that people who engage in misconduct are held accountable. But it's not simply an individual quality. As elected officials or potential elected officials, a person who's granted authority, true accountability means projecting accountability onto others, whether that be the people you hire, lobbyists you work with, or the peers you interact with. True accountability is creating an environment of accountability and holding others to the same level of accountability you hold yourself to. So what does a failure of accountability look like? Well, allowing an important oversight agency, such as the Legislative Inspector General at the state level, to remain unfilled for years, that's a failure of accountability. Integrity. Someone else's phone. So integrity. Integrity means remembering every day that you're a public servant in a democracy. It means remembering every day who you owe your service and your loyalty to, your constituents. It means you conduct yourself in your office with accountability and transparency in the front of your mind, even whenever it's not in the front of the mind of your voters. So what's a failure of integrity look like? Well, when an elected official says that I'll submit to the Inspector General or some other oversight agency when the Illinois Supreme Court tells me I have to, that's a failure of integrity. So transparency. Transparency is the bow that ties the whole package together. Transparency is the recognition that as an elected official, you serve the interests of your constituents, and in a democracy, that means those constituents have a right to know information that may impact your judgment, whether that be disclosing individuals or organizations that you meet with, or where you get your political donations from, or what private business dealings you have on the side. Transparency also means availing yourself to the independent oversight agencies that have been put in place to give voters reassurance that their elected officials are acting with accountability and integrity. So what does a failure of transparency look like? Well, if you have an allegation that one of your employees has engaged in misconduct, and you decide that instead of going to the Legislative Inspector General or some other oversight agency, that you're going to handle that investigation internally and any punishment internally, then you failed to act transparently. Even if you're acting with pure accountability and integrity in mind, because you failed to act transparently, your constituents will always be unsure of your true motives and whether you're actually fulfilling your obligations to them. That's really it. Accountability, integrity, and transparency. If you can internalize these concepts, then you can serve your constituents in an ethical way. I want to thank our Urban Times, Can TV, and Northwestern Settlement. I want to thank all the other organizations that made tonight possible. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak tonight, and good luck to all the candidates this evening. I hope we have a productive forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for being the avatar. So at this point, each candidate gets 2 minutes to talk about themselves. I know none of you are used to that at this point in the campaign, but hang in there and try. So Iris, you're up first.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'm Iris Millan. I want to thank our Urban Times, thank you, Elaine, and all of the organizations that helped put this together tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here. I have my children in the audience, Eddie and Samantha, and I am so proud to have them both here, but I can't emphasize enough how powerful it is for me to be running in a race with 4 women and show my daughter that there is a place for her in politics. I'm running for 4th District State Representative because I owe too much to my community. As an immigrant, arriving to this country as just 8 years old, I was afforded the opportunity to become a resident and a citizen of this country. And it is a full privilege for me to sit here before all of you exercising that very citizenship, something that I find that so many others often take for granted. As a mom, education and public safety are a priority for me. If given the opportunity to serve as your state representative, it will certainly be a priority for me in Springfield and bringing back resources that we've been stripped from in our communities. I hope that what you will take away today is to see in me the best and the most qualified candidate to serve as your state representative here in the 4th District, because I have a vast resume that I've spent, that I've dedicated to the very communities I hope to represent, and that includes experience in direct constituent services, working in local government, working in nonprofit organizations, and serving on boards and nonprofit organizations, again, here in the very 4th District communities. And then the past 2.5 years, I've spent my career doing community relations for a higher education institution here in the 4th District communities. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions tonight.
Thank you. Alyx Pattison.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. I'm Alyx Pattison. I want to echo some of what Ira said in terms of the thanks. Thank you, Elaine and Our Urban Times. Thank you to all the neighborhood organizations who worked so hard to get everybody here and put this together. Thank you, Northwestern Settlement and Rowe Elementary. And welcome, everybody. Thank all of you for being here. I have a very simple philosophy of government. It's that it's you and me and us, everybody in this room, getting together to make decisions about how best to take care of each other, how best to make sure we are giving the best and the most opportunities to the most people, how we are providing opportunity for all. And that the desire for me to be a part of that comes from my background. I was raised by a single mom, and we struggled. We struggled significantly. Sometimes I needed food stamps to get by. Sometimes we needed, free and reduced school lunch. We always needed earned income tax credit. And I am able to be the person I am today with a degree from Northwestern Law, having worked on Capitol Hill for a member of Congress. You okay there? It's a dirty job. I'm able to have accomplished things because government got together, we got together, and we made a decision not to leave anybody behind. And I take that very seriously, especially right now when I see people being left behind all over the place. This last 2 years with the budget impasse, we left people behind. The safety net degraded. Our schools are not performing the way they should be, and we have not invested in them to the extent that we need to. We can talk more about my background. Served on the local school council in the neighborhood, in my neighborhood, Ukrainian Village at Jose de Diego Elementary. But I want to give back, and I'm doing it from a place of understanding what it means to be the result of being an invested in person.
And next we have Delia Ramirez.
Thank you. I too echo the sentiments of both Iris and Alyx. It is an honor to be here. I'm running because I have to. I'm a lifelong resident of this district, a daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, Maria Ramirez and Luis Ramirez, and I still live on the same street where I grew up, actually next to them. They instilled in me the value of education, of hard work, and to always serve my community. Since I was a child, I have volunteered at local community centers. By 21, I was promoted to Executive Director of Center for Changing Lives, formerly known as Humboldt Park Social Services. There, I led the organization in providing services to hundreds and hundreds of families, from emergency services to housing placement to job placement and financial coaching. I've helped lead the fight against local school closings and Governor Rauner's scheme to continue to privatize our schools. I fought hard to create elected school boards that we need so that parents can actually have a true voice in their children's education. I've worked to bring nonprofits investment in our neighborhoods, expanding learning centers after class at our local schools. You see, for me, public service, it's not just a career, it's a calling. So when over 100 of my fellow community members asked me to run for state representative, I had to accept that call to serve my community and the people of the district. Springfield is broken. I believe that personal agendas and this business as usual is standing in the way of our working families. We need to invest in our community classrooms. Our children deserve the access to resources to succeed. We have to focus on making our communities safer, and we need affordable and accessible health care. Time's up. Time truly is up. We need to put Springfield on the side of our working families, our families, and that is why I'm running for state representative. Thank you.
And last but not least is Anne Shaw.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Oh, nobody wants to say good evening. Hi. Again, thank you, Elaine. Thank you to Northwest Settlement, to Rowe Elementary, and to everybody for coming here tonight. My name is Anne Shaw, and for those of you who may not know me, I've been a civil rights attorney for over 20 years. I'm a small business owner. My husband, Matt, who many of you know, both of us, Matt and I have lived just down the street for, oh my gosh, I'm getting old, like 20 years now. And I've seen a lot of changes in our communities here and throughout the 4th District, which is one of the big reasons why I'm running. When we first lived here, it was very diverse over here, and a mixture of Hispanic and African American and all kinds of different people. But, you know, I've got to tell you, with the rising costs of property taxes and the loss of services and people just having a hard time surviving, I said I had to step up. So I am the daughter of immigrants. I'm very proud of my parents. They came here for a new opportunity. And as a child, I went to a public school in the suburbs. I didn't speak any English, but my school had enough resources to provide me with a speech therapist. And by 1st grade, I was winning spelling bees. And that's something I want to see in the 4th District, in the state of Illinois. We have schools here that have 35 children. That's way too many kids. On top of it, they only have 25 books. Teachers have to come up with money out of their own pockets. And we're still paying higher and higher property taxes. For what? And then talk about public safety. Do you guys know we are called the, carjacking capital? That we are, for the Westtown people here, we're the Westtown ATM. I mean, this is insane for the amount of taxes we pay. And I have been standing alongside the community members here and throughout the 4th District. I'm the only candidate that's done that, from the east to the west. Real quick, working on affordable housing, public safety,
Time's
as
up,
well
Ann.
as, all right, I'm sorry. So thank you,
The
thank
hook
you.
comes next.
I know, I'll take the hook.
So I do want to also tell you that we should have 2, but we had at least 1 timekeeper down here. And so that's how we're making sure that they cut off, because the hook got lost in the back. Okay, so we are now going to go into the first round of questioning. Each candidate gets a maximum of 2 minutes to answer the same question that's asked. They're going to try and be really succinct so they can make it less time so that we can do more questions. Do we think that's going to happen? Okay, so we're going to try and see. The first question is actually, ladies, a twofer. So it's all about constituents. You guys. How will you keep your constituents informed about issues you are working on, legislation that is pending, and legislation that has passed? And the second part of that is how will you work with your constituents so you hear what they have to say, that you have a give and take, so maybe some FaceTime. So how will you keep your constituents informed about issues you are working on, legislation that is pending and legislation that is passed? And then how will you interface with your constituents? And let's start with Anne this time.
So many ways I plan. One, I plan to have committees of people from around the community with different backgrounds to advise me, as well as to keep me grounded and let me know what's going on in the community. Because I'm the first one to say I'm not the smartest person in the room. You guys are way smarter than me, and you know what's going on. Second of all, obviously, we will have a social media presence. We will be putting on Facebook, Twitter. It'll be on the website. We'll have town hall meetings. I plan to have
many of those. I will have an office where people can come in and speak. And if people sign up for like text alerts or email alerts, they will definitely get that information. I will do everything I can. I do intend to work with my committees to actually reach out to voters. I've been doing that for the last 4, 5, 6 years now, actually going to door, even before I ran for office, to talk about the issues and to let people know what's going on, because, you know, a lot of times things sneak up on people and you're like, you wake up and like, what the heck happened? And I don't think that's right, because going back to, I know Faisal wasn't here, but we need some real transparency. I mean, you guys are my boss. So I have to come and tell you what's going on. You don't always have to come to me. You should not like find out from the papers, holy cow, what happened? Or you get a bill and you're like, whoa, what happened, right? So those are some of the few things that I think we'll be doing for sure, because I know I want to know, and I want to let you know as well.
Thank you, Anne. Access is everything. Access is everything. We can't talk about being a representative if we don't know who we're representing. And so for me, it is really, really important that we're constantly listening. And that means we talk less, we hear more. One of the first things I agree with Anne is making sure that you have subcommittees. I also want to make sure that I have an office with staff that is available and an office that is open every single day. That is critical. I want to make sure that when I'm not in Springfield, I have at least one day a week where I'm taking at least 5 hours of conversations of people coming in. But here's the other thing. I hear this all the time, and I've actually said this all the time. You only knock on my door when you want my vote. The only way you really know, and I'll tell you because I've been knocking and knocking. The only way you really know what's happening is when you actually knock on that door and you ask people, what are you looking for in your next state representative? What are your concerns? And sometimes you're shocked to hear people tell you that they never have been asked that question. So for me, what I am committed to doing is to continue to knock on doors for the next 2 years, because there are people that will never make it to the office for one reason or the other. Some can't even physically leave their home. So my commitment is to do that as well, and to ensure that our social media, that our website and our phones are always up to date, receiving the information, because that's the only way that I can actually take things and represent you in Springfield.
So I'm going to piggyback off of what Delia just said in terms of the knocking. I plan to continue knocking doors for pretty much the exact same reason. I've heard the exact same thing from a lot of people in this district, which is nobody has ever shown up at my door before. And it means an incredible amount to them. And so I intend to continue knocking on doors as an elected state representative. In addition to that, it was a two-part. I think listening is incredibly important, but I also think communicating is very important. For those of you who are currently, I'm doing a newsletter right now as a candidate. And in that newsletter, it talks about my positions on a number of issues, some a little bit about the campaign, and also about what's going on in our community and what's happening in all of the parts of this very diverse district. I intend to have occasional Saturday hours, probably every other Saturday, so that people who don't work traditional hours have access to me and my staff. I also will be available in the community doing things like supermarket Saturdays, where I come to you in your neighborhood and visit with you at the supermarket as you're coming in and out, and listen to any concerns on your mind. So I intend definitely to be a very accessible representative. The other thing, depending on budget, I definitely intend to have an office in the part of this district where access and public transportation is less available, because there is a difference in this district between the east side and the west side. I want to make sure that people who need it most can walk down the street to get to my office. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to shine a light on who made tonight happen. The question was, how are you going to make yourself accessible and keep your constituents informed about legislation pending and legislation passed? One of the things that I pride myself in, having made this decision to run, was the fact that I approached so many people that I didn't have to introduce myself to. And that includes these organizations that are listed on here. Because I've attended your community meetings time and time again, EVA, CGNA, UVNA. When I mentioned earlier that I've dedicated my entire career in community building and community relations here in the 4th District, that is what I mean. For the past decade, almost 10 years ago is when I started attending regularly, whether at my capacity at the alderman's office or at the nonprofit organization or at City Colleges of Chicago. I've attended those meetings. This is a natural interest for me to know from the ground up what concerns the constituents and those stakeholders of the communities in the 4th District, the communities where I live. And I think that that's going to continue if given the opportunity to be your state representative. One thing that I learned at the door, knocking on doors for this election, has been asking the question. People ask the question. I've asked the question, do you know who your current state representative is? It was a shame to hear that half the people didn't know, and I think the onus is on our elected officials to make that known to our communities. We went through 973 days of a budget impasse. The fact that people didn't know how our current state representative was going to bat for us during those tough times is simply unacceptable. And there are many things that I respect our current state representative Cynthia Soto on, but I've learned from that track record and from what I'm hearing out at the door that that's something that needs to be changed, and I'm willing to make it happen. Yes, continuing those conversations with the stakeholders that already are getting the word out about what's going on in our communities, such as those present here today, is what I'll continue to do as your state representative.
Hook is upon
Thank
you.
you.
So question number 2 is also sort of two-parted. And this time I'm going to start with Iris. The question is, what are the biggest challenges facing the district and the state? And name the 3 that you consider to have the highest priority.
Sure, thank you. I mentioned briefly the budget impasse earlier. We certainly can't allow our legislators to utilize our pension budget as a credit card ever again. I have 3 priorities in mind when I think about it broader, as I think about working with colleagues in Springfield and broader impact at the state level, and that is passing first a progressive income tax in Illinois. We are overdue for that. Second of all, really visiting and diving deep into the benefits of passing a sales tax on goods and services, where families like yours and mine are also we're just the way that we are taxed at the grocery store for our everyday living items, that luxury items are being taxed the same as well. And then the third point would be also a very popular one from what I've learned in the 4th District, is the legalization of marijuana and the benefit, not only because of its economic benefits, but also because of its restorative justice component. Thank you.
So is the biggest challenges facing the district and the state? Is that what the question was? And then was there a second part of that? I'm sorry.
And the 3 top.
Oh, my top. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. So I think the biggest challenges are the ones that I hear about most when I knock doors for the district. Are people want, everyone's pretty much the same. They want, a few basic things. A good education for their child, jobs, and a thriving economy in which they can earn a living wage without having to work 2 and 3 jobs. And fourth, a crime and safety reduction. They want to feel safe in their neighborhoods. They want guns to be controlled. So those are the biggest issues that I hear about when I knock doors, and those are the issues that I think are facing the district from listening from what I'm being told. At the state level, I think it's an obvious one. It's the budget mess, and I would echo some of what Iris has said in terms of solving the budget mess. We absolutely have to pass a progressive income tax, and let me say that for a state representative, that's not just about working in Springfield on that. That's organizing and mobilizing in your community so that all of your voices are heard and we are able to put our muscle behind really moving that issue. People talk about it, but nobody does anything about it, and we need a progressive income tax. We also should be legalizing marijuana. That could raise approximately $700 million a year to address the budget mess. I think we also ought to increase the corporate income tax. We recently did that. We went from, I think it was 5.5 to 7, and still we're lagging behind those states that they say we can't compete with, like Indiana, which has an 8.5 in corporate income tax, and Minnesota, which has a 9.8. We are still lagging behind, and corporations should start paying their fair share. Thank you.
Here's what I'm hearing when I'm knocking on doors. Here's what I've been hearing in this district my entire life. We can't talk about future if we don't talk about our children. And we can't talk about our children if we don't talk about education. Education is one of the top priorities and something that we keep putting to the side. We have to fully fund our schools. We also need health care for all. The fact that people who are retired are still having to pay that supplemental Medicaid because they own a home and they're paying $289 a month on their fixed income is unacceptable. The fact that prescription companies are paying generic drug companies off so that they keep the medication off the shelf and we have to pay name brand and others are not able to have what they need is unacceptable. We need health care for all. And we also need public safety. And to have all that, we need adequate revenue. So I agree with the two of them. We need the political will to get the revenue that is necessary for us to have what we need. The fact that 2/3 of these corporate companies pay no tax, not a dime, these billionaires, but you and I, secretaries and seniors, have to pay everything should be illegal, and it's a crime, and someone should go to jail for that. Yet today, in Springfield, they continue to make sure that you and I are having to pay for that. And when education is having to be paid only by property tax owners, and we keep putting that burden, I'm looking, thank you. When we keep putting that burden, that is also unacceptable. So what I know that we need to do is we need to make sure that we fully fund education, that we have health care for all, and that we ensure that we have public safety and we get to the root causes of violence.
So the real issue in this state is revenue, right? And there are three things that are the basis of my campaign. One is education. You're absolutely right. We need to fully fund education. Illinois is one of the lowest in state income tax funding of our schools. And so what does that mean for your kids? And I see a lot of kids here that I think deserve better. What that means is that if you're in a richer suburb, you get more resources. If you're in a poorer area, you don't even have books or pencils. Okay, and that's unacceptable. So, and it also means for you parents and even non-parents that your property taxes are going out of the skyrocket, okay? And for many people who've lived here for a long time, you've probably seen your property taxes go from like $700 a year to like $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 and higher, right? And that's because the state has failed in its obligations to fully fund our schools. The second thing that I'm very concerned about and I'm gonna fight for is health care. My father's a retired social worker. He's 78 years old. The state promised him health care as part of his retirement. And there's many seniors here, and I've talked to many seniors, and they've told me, Ann, I'm gonna have to live on the street because I can't afford a $128 copay. No one, whether you're a senior citizen or a child, should have to worry about actually living your life or living on the street or not eating because of health care. It's inhumane. And so we have the money in the state to fund this. The third thing is, and all of this ties together, is public safety, the crime and the gun violence in our communities. The 4th District, unfortunately, has a lot of violent crime going on, and that is tied into the fact that we need more community policing. And we all know over here that our police station was closed, the 13th District, and then we've seen a big rise in that. Second of all, is we've got to have, I've run out of time, but mentoring programs, and that all ties in with education. So thank you.
So the third question may have you thinking that you're going to repeat yourselves, ladies. So, since, according to the group Truth in Accounting, Illinois has 25 billion to pay and 235 billion in bills. That is B with the billion, right? How does this influence your spending priorities? And what new revenue streams do you think are possible? And how would you be part of the solutions? Want me to do that again? Since according to the group Truth in Accounting, Illinois has 25 billion to pay, 235 billion in bills. In other words, they've got 25 billion in the checkbook, which is bigger than yours and mine. And how does this influence your spending priorities, and what new revenue streams do you think are possible, and how would you be part of the solutions? So let's start in the middle. How about, yes?
So what we have is, I'm so used to, so I have a preacher voice. We have a issue with addressing the fact that we need to raise revenue from the people that make most. I started saying that a little bit before. If we had a LaSalle street tax, if the people that the hedge fund managers were getting taxed, which they're not getting taxed now, we would be able to raise $12 billion a year. $12 billion. That's half of what we have to pay right now. If we legalize marijuana, like our friends here to the left said, that will be almost $1 billion in revenue. If we expanded sales tax to luxury services, that would be another billion. Iowa taxes about 400 services. We tax about 50 luxury services. The bottom line is that there is no more that working families can continue to be taxed. Anne is right. My parents are property owners, and they have to figure out between health care, property taxes, and every other thing that comes up. We need to make sure that we have the political will and the courage to pass a progressive income tax, and it has to happen now. We can't wait another 3-4 years to make that happen. We need a constitutional amendment. We also need the leadership that's going to push for it, and these revenues. At the end of the day, I think if we have to remember anything else, is the rich need to pay their fair share. You and I should not be paying more than a billionaire. And that means that we need working class people representing us in Springfield who know what it's like when we have to pay far more than our fair share.
I agree. We do in Illinois have a revenue problem, and the second part of that question is how does that impact what choices you would make? And budgets are moral documents. We are making decisions about how, like I said in my opening remarks, about how we are going to get together to take care of each other. And I will tell you that that doesn't change my priorities at all. And education is going to be the top priority for me as a state representative. I served for 4 years on the local school, 5 years almost, on the local school council at Jose de Diego, and I saw up close and personal in that school how well we are not treating our students. And these are Chicago's kids. This is our future. Investments in people and creation of opportunity should be the top priority of every person who represents someone in Springfield. And frankly, let's talk about that. If people get a good education, then they have good jobs. The economy thrives. We all thrive. We all do better when we do better. So a lot of what they said I agree with in terms of raising revenue. We have to increase the corporate income tax. We have to legalize marijuana. We have to close the carried interest loophole so that hedge fund managers are actually paying a full income tax instead of half of what the rest of us pay. Progressive tax amendment, creating the muscle and the political will to make that happen. Eliminating corporate tax breaks when they don't provide a demonstrated public good. Amazon, let's take that for instance right now. Nobody has done a cost-benefit analysis on that. We have no idea if all of those corporate tax breaks that are going to go to a massive billion-dollar company are going to pay off for any of us on the street. And unless that public good can be demonstrated, we shouldn't be trading our tax dollars for them. And on that point also, that public good, the whole offer to Amazon isn't transparent. Governor Rauner went with Rahm Emanuel and made promises and proposals to Amazon that we don't know the details of without General Assembly approval. So it doesn't change my revenue priorities at all, and I agree with a lot of their sources. And I have time's up, so I'll pass it to Iris.
Thank you. I think we're missing a very important point here. When we talk about, and I agree with my contenders here at the table that, and I mentioned earlier the top 3 priorities I would have in terms of alternative sources for revenue. So that's the progressive income tax, hands down, arduously would advocate for it. Sales tax on goods and services, another untapped revenue source, the legalization of marijuana, and we heard some of the figures being brought up. But there's one important point here. The state is not going to resolve all of our issues in terms of revenue here in our district. We need to count on our allies in the federal government, and we need to count on our allies in the city government, and our local and Cook County government as well. I pride myself with already having those allies, seeing in me the most qualified candidate to get that done for you in Springfield. So when we talk about bringing back our 13th police district station, because we've heard public safety is an issue, I know it. As a working mom, I want to be able to go to work and think that my kids could be safely ride their bikes on our block. We're going to depend on our allies at every level of other government. Yes, we have opportunities in Illinois. We have opportunities as state legislators, but it's going to take a lot more than that to haul in and to be able to pay the $25 billion and to be able to ultimately bridge that gap in the spending in Illinois. So think about that. Think about who at this table is most qualified to get that done for you. I pride myself in already counting with our neighboring elected officials in Springfield who see in me a colleague for them, and helping create an able body to make that push for you in Springfield. And so that leads me to my next point in terms of how are we going to prevent from us falling into a budget impasse fiasco. And that lastly, we need a progressive caucus in Springfield to be able to protect ourselves from ever happening.
Right now, we cannot cut our way out of this situation, our budget. So about 90% of our general revenue fund goes to, I want to make sure I get this right, education, public safety, healthcare, and social services. As we've already talked about tonight, that we're already severely underfunded. The other problem that we have is that the way that we generate income taxes here disproportionately falls upon the poor and the middle class. So even though the state of Illinois is about 24th out of 50 states in overall taxation, it feels like a heavy burden because it is on most of the working people. And so the problem is how is the revenue generation being distributed? So yes, every single state that touches Illinois, from Kentucky to Wisconsin, and I use those states because they're the most conservatives, they actually have an aggregate higher income tax rate than Illinois because they have something called, and we've talked about tonight, a graduated income tax, which is something that we have to have in the state. But in the meantime, one thing that I propose to give our middle class and low income people a tax break while generating over $1.5 billion in revenue is something called a sales tax deduction with a cap. So we pay taxes on our sales tax that we pay, and it's one of the highest in the nations. So my proposal, and something I believe that we can get passed with bipartisan support, is to allow families to deduct sales taxes up to a certain percentage, like 20%, up to a cap of maybe like $20,000. So that is a huge amount that helps a lot of our middle class. And there's at least 3 tax loopholes that I propose to close. One is for gasohol, 2 is for machinery and equipment, and 3 is tax breaks that for certain nonprofits like President's Healthcare that pays its CEO $2 million a year. And I know they're not giving out free health care services. So these are some of the things that I propose in addition to what some of the other ladies have already mentioned. And my time is up, so thank you.
On the day when Chicago Police Department announced, that's today, that they have taken in the 1,000th gun off the streets since January 1, as a House of Representative, what do you see as your responsibility in addressing crime? And let's start with Alyx.
Thank you. I was going to say it was my turn to go first.
Oh, Beecha.
So, shockingly, in Illinois, and I find this crazy, we have the political makeup, it would seem, in our General Assembly with a majority of Democrats in both houses to pass an assault gun, a ban on assault rifles, and yet we haven't done that. I think we start there when it comes to guns. We also need to be licensing all gun dealers. Another basic, simple thing we can do to track guns in order to help gun trafficking and be able to trace guns and the commission of crimes in our neighborhoods. Although it gets somewhat difficult when we border, we share a country with folks that don't have stringent gun laws. The third thing that I think is critically important when it comes to guns is we ought to be able to pass legislation that allows for people, law enforcement and or family members of individuals who are displaying emotional or mental indicators that they are wanting to harm themselves or the people around them. We ought to be able to have the right to petition courts for a judicial review to take those guns away. Take Florida, what happened last week in Florida, for example. I actually knocked on a door last week of a woman in Wicker Park who answered the door of the day of that shooting, crying, hugged me and said, "What are you going to do about this?" And we ended up crying together. And the reality is, if a child, a young person, somebody is posting on Facebook that they have every intention of hurting someone else or themselves, we ought to be able to have recourse to balance our rights against, and our right to be safe against those people and their right to bear arms. So that's where I would start, at least in terms of guns. And I'm going to pass the microphone to whoever's next.
Thank you. It's a no-brainer. We see it here locally in our community. Guns we need stronger gun legislation here in Illinois. As your state legislator, I would arduously advocate to, yes, ban AR-15s in our communities, in our state, period. But also thinking about the national events, the events that made national news. Parkland, Florida, for example, was the latest. It was an AR-15 that was utilized. And so I think it was regressive for our state to pass laws on silencers. It was regressive to pass laws allowing, is it stump stocks? Bump stocks, thank you, which was essentially what allowed these shooters to shoot 7 times more rapidly at these tragic events. So no, it's a no-brainer. We need stronger advocacy at our state level. Alyx brought up a good point that you would think we have enough Democrats at the state to help us make this push. But once again, I brought it up earlier, we're not going to be able to make inroads with any of that until we are able to create a caucus, a voting bloc in Springfield that is going to have the power to hold those accountable that need to be held accountable to pass sensible laws for our communities. A progressive caucus, I would arduously, and I would love to serve on it as your state legislator, and I would love to see a woman caucus being formed as well in Illinois. Thank you.
So, I mean, it boils down to the National Rifle Association and all the big money that's pouring into it and how many. I think I read that an AR-15 sells for like $1,000 or maybe $800. And so that's the problem. It's like the rest of us are dying out here, and we have a lot of shootings in Chicago, and and so I'm part of an organization called Parents for Peace and Justice, where they are the parents of children who've been victims of gun violence. And this is the big problem. When we take that money out, then we can really start having real conversations. So we need to take a look at who is actually taking that money. We need to make a commitment as legislators not to take that money. Of course, and the other thing that I have to point out is there is a lot of gun laws on our books now. But one thing that I learned when we were fighting to save the 13th district from closing is that something like 95% of gun-related crimes go unprosecuted and unsolved in the city of Chicago. So, of course, I agree that, you know, gun dealers need to be licensed and we need to trace that, but we need to look at the enforcement arm of it. Do we have enough detectives to solve these crimes? Do we have enough prosecution of these crimes? So those are things that we need to look at as legislators as well, work with our community groups to address, but also stop taking that money from lobbyists that profit off of our children's blood and off of the death that we're dealing with in our communities. And I think that's something that we need to keep talking about. And you know what, I gotta give kudos to our high school kids, because I gotta tell you, they're right. They're smarter than the adults in the room, right? And they're right. How much of their blood needs to be spilled? And enough is enough. So thank you.
Our children are not the future, they're the present. And until we start thinking of our children as the present and the future, things are not going to change. I was the Deputy Director of Community Renewal Society, an organization that organizes, mobilizes, and leads advocacy efforts at the state level for criminal justice reform. Right now, there's a gun licensing bill that is sitting in Springfield that has not moved. That organization, along with a number of other organizations, take people to Springfield, and we lobby, and we advocate, and we talk about the stories of the number of people that are dying because they're not doing their job. Yes, Iris, we need a progressive caucus, and we need people that are courageous enough to lead and understand how to do that. We also need to be able to talk about violence and understand that violence is a public health issue. And when we're not funding mental health services and we have a budget impasse for 2 years, we cut after school programs, we continue to cut our schools, there are no mentorship programs, and we have all these barriers to employment for people with records, there is a consequence to that. You are right. The budget at the state level is supposed to be focused on public safety, on healthcare, education, and social services. When we defund, when we do what we have been doing, we are seeing this impact us at all levels, and it's certainly impacting us in the 4th District. So my commitment and what I think we need to do is go back to raising revenue, and we have to look at the root causes of violence. We have to invest in our children, and we have to invest in criminal justice reform, and we need to pass gun licensing bills that are sitting there with seat warmers that they call themselves legislators. We need a progressive caucus, not more the same of the people that we say that are with us or are not with us. We need actual people that are going to do the work and understand the impact and the root causes of violence.
So we're gonna start with Iris on this one, and we're going to move to healthcare. Governor Rauner's budget cuts $1.5 billion, that's with a B, from Medicaid at the same time as the federal government is giving states more leeway in running their Medicaid programs. What would be your responsibilities in maintaining medical and nutritional support to the poor?
I spent the past 2 years building a partnership. I currently work for City Colleges of Chicago, and we built a partnership from the ground up with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. It's called the Healthy Student Market in college campuses across the city. My efforts were focused in the northwest side of Chicago, here in the 4th District communities, to shine a light, not just to bring resources, food and nutrition to the students at Wright College, but also but also to shine a light. Once we started diving deep into the research going into hunger issues among college students and hence in our communities, there's an issue if they come to college hungry, it means they're not accessing food and health care at home. So all of that, everything, all the research we dive deep into through that partnership shined a light on the fact that it is a healthcare issue. It was lack of nutrition programs in our community. And I personally grew professionally from that partnership. It is now turning into an on-site pantry at all of the colleges in Chicago. But ultimately, we were able to take it to the next level because of the repercussions around healthcare issues and around access to food in our communities. As state representative, I will arduously ensure, and having spent 10 years working in hospitals, 3.5 here on Division and Western, I learned also the ins and outs of funding for healthcare, and the healthcare services are not always available to the most vulnerable. During the Affordable Care Act rollout, I participated in workshops bringing to the community enrollment services for those healthcare access, and I would advocate for such programs to continue in our state to make sure that the most vulnerable not only are receiving the funding, equitable funding toward it, but also receiving the resources necessary. Thank you.
Really quickly, I want to circle back to the last question for one quick second about guns and the courageous leadership that is required to impact that debate in Springfield. And one thing that I want to say is that we as a Democratic caucus, you as people making your representatives, whoever is elected, accountable to that caucus, it requires that we also stand up to the speaker when necessary. And that means demanding that Speaker Madigan call a bill that will literally save children's lives in the city of Chicago. I don't care if one of the members in rural Illinois is beholden to the NRA and may lose their seat. That is not what I care about. What I care about are the children who are losing their lives on our streets. And I do really quickly also want to say, when we talk about destroying the safety net, that is having implications in our community. 2,500 kids were turned away in 1 year from homeless shelters in the city of Chicago during the budget impasse. What do you think happens to those children? They need help. And what happens to them is they turn to other sources they pick up a gun and commit crimes. Let's turn to healthcare. $1.5 billion cut in Medicaid, it's despicable. We have an obligation, going back to the very first thing I said when I came in here, we have an obligation to each other to create a safety net that takes care of all of those among us. And if you can't afford, if you're making a decision between medicine and food, or medicine and your rent, or medicine and keeping your home warm, that is not a decision that we should be forcing on anyone. We have enough money in our country, this land of plenty, revenue problems that we just talked about. We have enough money to take care of each other, and we must. Healthcare is a right. I believe that 100%. And it's something that we must fund fully and that we must work to make sure is fully funded, especially in a Trump America where the federal government is leaving us behind.
You know, and Elaine, when you emphasize what's happening nationally, what's happening at the state level, I can't stop myself from thinking about what's happening to women and where are we going to be? Where is our women's health going to be next week, next month? The reality is that we are under attack, and if ever at the state level we have to do more is right now. We do need health care for all. I know as I knock on doors, but I also as I talk to my family members about trying to stretch the prescription, about breaking the pill in half so that you have more, and maybe your blood pressure will go up, but at least I'll be able to pay the property taxes or pay the rent or send my son to school. It's unacceptable. I started talking about the profiteering on our lives or based within our lives of prescription companies. And this whole pay to delay, right? They pay you to be able to have the generic prescription off the shelf so that we pay $700 instead of $15 so that we end up dying, that should be a crime and someone should go to jail for it, and it's not happening. I want to make sure that at the state level, I do what I can to introduce legislation to stop the pay to delay, because that pay to delay is my family's ability to be able to get the medication they need to survive, our district's ability to have that. The second piece that I want to be able to talk about that's really important is that California and many other states, they make sure that the same Department of Veterans Affairs discount that they get, state health agencies receive as well. I want to make sure that at the state level, we're also able to get that 24% discount, because that bottom line means that our people, when they go for their prescription, when they go into the hospital, to the clinic, they're also going to be paying less. Bottom line, that saves consumers so that we can have a more higher quality of life. Those are two things that we can do if we have the political will and we have people that understand the importance of healthcare.
So when we didn't have a budget for almost 3 years, do you know who suffered the most? The seniors, kids, and disabled, the very poor that you talked about, Elaine, and people actually died. And I hate to say that. One of my clients actually runs a home health care service, and she hung out for as long as she could, paying her employees out of her pocket so that they can continue to provide the services to the seniors and the disabled people who relied life and death on her care. But she recently had to close her business because she just couldn't make ends meet anymore and couldn't pay her employees. And so all those people weren't given care, and that's inhumane. We're fellow human beings. We're not all billionaires. We're not all people who have security in our health care. I mean, even if you have a good job that pays you your health benefits, what if you lose that job? I mean, we think about that all the time. So you know what I did? I looked at other countries. I looked across the border. I said, well, how do they do it? And I did a lot of research on this, and because I've heard all the rhetoric, like, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, we're going to bankrupt the country. Well, geez, you know, other countries are still going. Their people are healthy. They get free education. They get good health care. They haven't gone bankrupt yet, and we don't have to either. And in fact, when we talk about profiteering on health care, right, the reality is it's actually caused the artificial inflation of hospital costs. You read about the articles where a Tylenol that you get down the street, you get a whole box for $10, and they charge you $10, $15 just for one pill. It's not that Tylenol pill costs that much. It's because they've got to do all this paperwork, pay all these people to figure out how they're going to get paid. And so the bottom line is that we all suffer when a few people profit. And so we have to look at it. And going back to the state of Illinois, we do need to look at expanding Medicaid. Okay, that has to be done. We're already below where we should be. So, I've already talked earlier about revenue generation. We all have, and that's something that we need to do. Thank you.
We're going to sort of switch to a different kind of subject. It's a harsh truth that candidates' chances of success are often measured in their fundraising skill. What role would you take in making campaign finance reform happen and in using the current system to advance a progressive agenda? Let's start with Delia.
Campaign finance reform. I was the campaign manager for Common Cause Illinois. It's part of a national democracy organization where that's exactly the conversation we have. How do we make sure that we get big money out of politics so that we can actually get to the work of representing the communities we serve? There is also, you may not know this, there is a bill that was introduced by Senator Biss to bring campaign finance reform to the state of Illinois. Unfortunately, it has not moved. And it has not moved because we can't get Democrats or Republicans to want to move on it, because it means that they have to now be accountable to the people. And it means that they won't be able to buy themselves into an election. So I would be right there with Senator Biss or Governor, whoever he is, at the House leading the effort to get big money out of politics. The fact that we have a governor that makes $13,500 an hour in his private companies while he's our governor and is privatizing everything at our expense is unacceptable, and it should never happen. We have to get big money out of politics, and at the city level, we also have to do the same thing, and I know Common Cause is leading an effort to get fair elections here in Chicago. It's the only way we have a fair due process so that we can get everyday people to run for office, not someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone's cousin, or someone told me that I'm gonna put you in and give you $100,000. We have to get big money out of politics, and we have to do it now.
I'm going to have you bring it back to Anne.
Oh boy. So I got to tell you that there's a great website called I think my husband found it for me. I don't know. I saw him here. The Illinois Sunshine website. I think everybody should take a look at each of the candidates here and where they got their money from. And I will tell you, I've been a huge proponent for campaign finance reform, because what happens is you kind of, if we don't have comprehensive campaign finance reform, good people can't run, because it takes a huge amount of money to run. And why? Because we need to reach out to every voter here. So there's a statistic that shows that, people don't even remember your name unless you've contacted them 6 or 7 times. And that could be a combination of meeting you face to face, mail, TV, radio, and every one of those things costs a lot of money because there's a lot of you out there. So, and the bottom line, I can tell you, of all the candidates sitting up here, I am the most independent. I have not taken any money from any ward bosses or committeemen who control this district, unlike my opponents here. And some of them have gotten 5-figure numbers. And so you got to ask yourself, who is your elected official going to be accountable to? Who are they going to listen to? 90% of my money comes from individuals, voters here, friends, families, people I sit on the ACLU Illinois board with. And I got to tell you, it's a hard road, and it's not easy. Okay, because I've got to be on the phone calling people, asking them for money, having events. And this is not just happening here, it's happening nationally. This is why people like the NRA are able to do what they do. And we see that's how pharmaceutical companies are able to control the money, and how, these are the things you have to look at. That's why I say take a look at where your elected official or your politician's getting their money, and who are they really accountable to. And that's why we must have campaign finance reform, so good people don't have to rely on that, so that good people can actually have a fair chance, so we don't end up with just billionaires and multimillionaires running, and we go back to a feudal system. Yes, I studied history, and that's what we're going to. We're going towards that, because now you have to be a multimillionaire to run for Congress. Do you realize congressional candidates are asked to raise like $2 million? I don't have that kind of money, okay? I'm sure there's very few people who do. Oh my God, I thought she cut me off. I saw my time's up. All right, I'm done.
So a couple of things. First, I think as we sit here today, I'm probably the candidate who's raised the least in this campaign. And most of my money has come from individual donors, and said that all of us have taken money from a ward boss. And for those of you who don't know, I ran for 2nd Ward Alderman 3 years ago. I lost to Alderman Brian Hopkins during that campaign, which was tough and a long road, I think it's fair to say, and I can't really speak for him, but he and I earned each other's respect. We were out in the cold, knocking doors, constantly. I could see him and he could see me. He's given me $2,500. And I think that it's fair to say someone I ran against 3 years ago in a tough campaign doesn't control a single thing I do. So I'm going to put that out there. You can ask the other candidates about their donations from aldermen. I would love to see public financing of campaigns with a matching, contribution from the state and a public fund where every candidate agrees not to take money over X dollars or spend over X dollars in order to receive that matching fund. That way people like you and all of us in this room who are regular people, waitresses or nurses or teachers, can run for office. Let me say though, that we do have a Supreme Court problem. There is precedent on the books that tells us that a person of great wealth, like a J.B. Pritzker, like a Bruce Rauner, can spend unlimited amounts on their own campaign. And that puts all of us at a disadvantage. And currently, short of getting that repealed at the Supreme Court level, there's not much we can do about that. But let me say, I would also encourage two things from you. As people rise up in a couple of ways. The first way is reject candidates that are, Daniel Biss calls it, we have auctions and not elections these days. So do your best to stand up against that big money. The second thing is all of you consider giving $10 contributions, $50 contributions when you can, because they matter and they add up.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues here on the table. I think campaign finance reform is necessary in Illinois, and we've seen it with our governor's race. We've seen it with our attorney general race. One thing I've learned doing fundraising myself in this is, I agree with everyone. It takes a lot of money and a ridiculous amount of money to run campaigns. It's my first experience having to do so, and it's interesting because some of what Alyx touched on in terms of capping the amount of money that people and institutions or companies can donate is already in place in some cases. We've talked to companies, utility companies, if you will, who already have a cap. They have adopted these policies, and nothing really holds them legally accountable to do that. Why can't we take that rhetoric and implement it in our nation and in our state, and yes, in our city? And then and the bottom line of all of this is to be able to level the playing field across the board in elections and have a true democratic process. Thank you.
So we're going to do our last question in this round, and it is, new legislators, in other words, freshmen, in Illinois work at a special disadvantage because the House leadership holds unusual power, you may have noticed, to control the makeup of committees and the legislative calendar. How will you press your agenda when it conflicts with that of Speaker Mike Madigan? Oh, I'm sorry. Why is everybody looking at me? Okay. Iris, would you please start?
I think when it comes to being state representative, I'm always going to do what's right for the 4th District. There's no doubt in my mind, I understand from the ground up what the issues and what matters the most for the constituents of the 4th District are, and rest assured, as your state representative, I will always do what's right and vote on what's right and what's truly representative of the 4th District residents. And in terms of House leadership and how we got there, all of us have brought it up at this table. We need a real power voting bloc in Springfield that's going to help navigate those waters and hopefully start shifting the climate that we operate on in terms of our legislature operates on in terms of how we ended up with a leadership in the House for the past 30 years. I'd be interested in seeing a challenger for that. And until then, I think, throwing a bone at our current legislators, I think it's been tough for them to not have options. For me, I think what should be easy for all of us, for every legislator, is it's as simple as voting and always doing what's right for the constituencies they were elected to represent. And if that is not happening, then the voter should make a decision based on that. And that's where I stand. Thank you.
So Speaker Madigan is always the elephant in the room, isn't he? I can tell you this. I am not afraid to tangle with him or any member of House leadership when it comes to representing the people who hired me. I'm going to, like I said, I'll be accessible to you in one of those questions. We will have a constant dialogue, whether I'm knocking on your door, seeing you at the supermarket, whether you're visiting me, coming to my offices. I'm going to know what it is that's on your mind. And if standing up for you and working for you requires me to stand up to him, that's a no-brainer. It's going to be easy. one of the things I would like to do, getting there, is advocate, fight for term limits on leadership. I believe that inside a caucus, there shouldn't be a leader who's allowed to be there seemingly forever. We have to be able to do better inside our own caucus. And I think part of that organizing within the caucus comes in two ways, and it's been mentioned here before. I will be a very big proponent when I get there on day one of organizing a progressive caucus and a very, very strong women's caucus, which right now I don't know that it is operating as strongly as it could. Both of those two potential voting blocks have the power to start to demand things from leadership, including term limits on our leaders. That's where I would start, those two things. Thanks.
Yeah, we don't have a strong women's caucus. We don't have a strong Latino caucus, quite frankly. What I think we do have is a very strong seat warmer caucus across the board of people that have been representing us, have been sitting there for a very, very long time and have forgotten who they're supposed to be working for. So I would say, I reiterate what Iris and what Alyx have said. At the end of the day, if we are doing our job, and we are accessible, and you're able to see what we're doing and how we vote, you'll know where we're standing rather quickly. So my job is to make sure that I'm always standing on the side of the people of the 4th District, and that means that there will be times where we are not going to be seen side to side or eye to eye with Speaker Madigan or other leadership of the Democratic side. There's a reason why we are here today. We don't have a fair tax. There's a reason why our schools are underfunded. We haven't been doing the work that we have to do on both sides. And my commitment is to always stand on the side of the 4th District. And you're going to be able to see that very quickly, because you can go online at any time and see how we have voted on every bill on any election. So that is my commitment. When we talk about Progressive Caucus, I've been organizing people to go to Springfield for quite a long time. A colleague of mine, my director of organizing, who works for me, we've done that, and we've brought churches from Evanston to Naperville and Chicago. And this is why I'm running. You should see the people that we have to pull teeth to do anything. Some of them may be watching right now. We have to make sure that we get adequate, courageous leadership that is not interested in being a career politician, but actually going to do the work of the district. That's my commitment. It has been my commitment. I have advocated for legislation to remove barriers to employment, and we've passed it. And I have a proven record to do that as an advocacy person, and I'm going to do the same thing inside.
So this is a question about bravery. So I want to take some of us back to 2011 when we got a new mayor, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. So guess what? Out of everybody sitting at this table, I'm the only one that went head-to-head with Rahm Emanuel for our community. When he was trying to pass that budget to close our schools, to close our 13th District Police Station, and also to close our mental health facility, the only one that we had in this district, right? So I actually went face-to-face with him, and I told him, I said, don't do this. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared, because I heard he puts dead fishes in people's like mailboxes or something, and I was like, ooh. But I will tell you, but I was scared, and you know, I talked to my dad about it the night before I was gonna do it, because I had hundreds of people here in this community relying on me to do that. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, he's the new mayor, he's gonna kill me or something. And so my dad said to me, you know what, he's a civil rights activist from the South in the 60s. He actually worked with Dr. Martin Luther King. And you know what he said to me? He said, Annie, my family calls me Annie. He's like, Annie, don't be afraid. You know what they did to the black people in the South in the 60s? He's like, they ain't gonna do that to you. And he said, you go there and you tell the mayor what you think. And I did. And I went to his face, and he was just like, blah, blah, blah. He was like stuttering, because he didn't know that this little lady here was gonna fight him, and I did. And I also stood up to Rahm Emanuel to his face on HB 40, which is the law that guarantees women's reproductive rights. So, and I've also stood up to the Illinois Supreme Court, but that's another story for another night. But I will tell you this, when we look at the young people today and the Me Too movement, and you see on the news every night now about calls for Speaker Madigan to step down, And that's because there were brave women, brave young people who came up and said it. And the point of the matter is that's how a movement gets started. That's what's important. And I believe that we can be strong and stand up. And real quick, there's a huge change in the state legislature. I think something like 30% of our state legislators changing. And I think this is an opportunity for us to get some change, including change in leadership. So thank you.
Okay. So this is the end of this round. And I did not indicate to you who these wonderful people are that are sitting up front, giving them the, okay? So we have Liz Kuhn from Westtown Neighborhood Association and Lynn Wilson from CGNA, Chicago Grand Neighbors, and you want to help me thank them? Our next round is going to be you guys. So you get a chance to ask a question, and I want to introduce one other person. Bob Swolinski, you may recall, is very intimately involved with this 4th district.
Sign autographs.
And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, he took a staple to the head in the last election. So Bob is going to be the person who's going to go out and the Jason, can you do him? Yes. So we're going to ask you to ask a question. Now, I would like people who are residents and not working for a campaign to get their first chance to ask a question, right? So I memorized everybody who held up their hand.
Right, first take here.
Okay.
Gentleman in the back here.
Can you walk over to
We'll
the
do it
mic,
like a
sir?
baseball game there. Pass it down.
Thank you. It's great to have a choice for a change in our election, so to have 4 qualified candidates to choose from. It's been a while since that happened. Thank you for running, but in most legislative districts, that's not happening. Where there's an incumbent, they have an uncontested primary because our system of campaign finance benefits the incumbents, and our system of redistricting benefits the incumbents. And so 2 years from now, one of you will be the incumbent, and I want to know what you'll do when you stand to benefit from that same system to ensure greater democracy in Illinois legislative races.
Okay, so these are going to be faster rounds, guys. So we're going to give you 1 minute on these. Let's start with Anne.
So Ben, that's a very good question. I did speak earlier about having a lot more town halls, offices, being in constant communications, and having those committees. So that's one way that we keep people engaged. And I do hope people challenge me. And I hope, and I tell you, I need to be grounded. I totally agree with you. I see it time and time again. And so I do those committees so that people can like slap me around and say, hey, wake up, we need help here. You promised this, where we're at on that. So that's what I'm hoping from each and every one of you, whether you're supporting somebody else, eventually one of us will be your state representative and we are representing each one of you. So that's real quick what I would say.
I would echo what you said about accessibility and making sure that we have town hall meetings. We also need to work with our neighborhood groups that are already existing, fund our block clubs and our neighborhood associations to do the work that they need to do to build collectives so we're not trying to duplicate organizations already created. The second thing I'll tell you is this. I already have a date for a retreat with every single person that has volunteered on my campaign and every person that drafted me. We're meeting either April 7th or 14th. I should know very soon. It's a post-election retreat. I want to hear what went well. I want to hear what went bad. And win or lose, we're having this retreat. And it's really important because we're already going to be talking about how we're going to hold either me or one of these 3 lovely ladies accountable to ensure that they're going to do, or I am going to do, the job that we promised all of you that we would do. I'm going to open it up to absolutely everyone, including any of you who did not volunteer but want to be part of that. This is what accountability accountability looks like, contabilidad looks like. And so that is one thing that I'm going to do. The second thing is that I'm already talking to people, young people in my campaign, and saying, when are you going to run? And we're investing in them, and we're building leadership development for that.
So this seems like as good of an opportunity as any to say, I am so proud to be running with these three women. It's very hard to, in the middle of this race, not be wishing that I wasn't running against three great women, but let's recognize what you said is 100% right. Three other great women, and you all have a great group to choose from. So you talked about accountability in Illinois legislative races. I don't think it's just legislative races. I think it's city council. I think it's county. I think it's federal races. I think it's statewide races. And I want to build a democratic organization, and I pledge to do this, that operates outside of the 50 ward organizations. Because those precinct organizations, those aldermanic organizations have such control in our city. And it is about time that we start operating outside of them and creating our own independent organizations that are regional and that are sensitive to the needs in our communities. You have my pledge on that.
Thank you. I think the initial response to that would be campaign finance reform. Independently of what was just brought up, I fully agree there are those powers to be that have either more weight, it's feet on the ground, and that's going to come down from people like you. I agree with Alyx about and Delia reaching out to in our very communities. It's about community engagement, civic engagement, looking at what we've done in the past and in those efforts. But it's going to come down, guys, to campaign finance reform and really honing in. If that doesn't happen in 2 years, when one of us is running for re-election, then it's going to take you, the voter, to start looking at that all over again and figuring out, based on what we said today, basing your new vote on whether or not we held our pledges from tonight. And certainly civic engagement, educating our communities on what it means to be engaged in the democratic process. And accessibility is certainly something I brought up early on in today's forum. Being there, listening not only to your needs, but also about how you can become more engaged. Thank you.
And next.
Good evening, ladies.
Oh, wait, hold. I did want to say one quick thing about it. Iris brought up a good point about, campaign finance reform. One thing that I have to bring this up because I believe that we have to have ethics in campaign finance as well. And, unfortunately, we've had a situation in this race where someone created like a fake organization and put out some really terrible mail piece on somebody, and they violated campaign finance laws. And so I know we filed a complaint about it, and that's something that, Ben, going back to you, I think we need to have ethics on the people running in their races.
Integrity.
Yeah.
That's important.
And so, that's something that I have to bring up because, people need to know that that kind of stuff is not right, and I don't know if you had any.
I mean, it's talking about a mailer that went out there was unacceptable. We have collectively made sure we found out what they violated campaign finance law. So if you get a mailer from someone, just know that it should say paid by. And if it doesn't, whoever sent that did that illegally, and they violated campaign finance law.
I'm just going to call a spade a spade. The Social Justice Fund is a nonsense fund that doesn't exist, isn't registered to be politically spending in our neighborhood, and should not be paid attention to. What they are doing is illegal, it is improperly funded, and it is purposely evading campaign finance law. And the three of us have written a letter to that fact. And so if you get any mailers from the Social Justice Fund, ignore them as illegitimate and dirty campaign tricks.
Good evening. I'm a lifelong resident of the 4th and also a member of the Chicago Teachers Union, and am asking the candidates whether or not they would be in support of charter schools being unionized, and if so, how would you help that process along?
Hell yeah, Taurus. Hell yes. We need, part of the problem with, and I support our charter school families, the kids, and the parents, and the teachers. And I got to give a big kudo to my big friend over there on SHIAX joining with CTU. I believe that we need to have more workers' rights. As a civil rights attorney for over 20 years, I see workers' rights going shrinking and shrinking. And that means even white-collar workers. It's everywhere. So in terms of how we're going to help, part of the problem that we have now is people like, I mean, I hate to bring this up, but like Magic Johnson, what kind of education background does he have? And why did we give millions of dollars of public money to fund his charter school? And I found out, you know how he's teaching these kids with computers, people. That's where your money's going, so he can make money. Ooh, and how much money did he give to Mayor Emanuel? So I will tell you right now that yes, we need more, not only just supporting that, the Stop the Charter School expansions, but we need transparency on how that money's spent. And they can't just go around kicking what kids out of schools. I guess it's called a fully funded neighborhood school. So yes.
I would absolutely support it. I will take a lead on making sure it happens. Our teachers, be in a charter school or in a local neighborhood school, should have the right to collective bargaining, should have the right to have the pension and the benefits that they need so that they can teach our children. If they are living burdened trying to figure out how they're going to pay the rent in the 4th district, and also, well, if they live in the 4th district, and also be able to teach our children, this is why you see the turnover you see in these schools. Absolutely. I will work with them, and I will make sure that we do whatever it takes to ensure that they have the right to unionize.
So, I come from a union family, a proud union background. It's why I am who I am. It's why I am the progressive I am, and you betcha I would be there every step of the way helping charter school teachers organize. It gives me an opportunity to circle back to something Anne said, which bothers me, which is that nobody else has ever taken Rahm Emanuel on individually. Delia can talk to that too, but my personal experience with him was on this very issue. When I ran for alderman, I talked to him on the side after a appearance at Wicker Park, and it was about this issue. My view of charter schools is that they're created from the top down as a way of evading the obligations to teachers and as a way of undermining teaching as a profession in order to pay teachers less and give them fewer benefits. And I disagree with it wholeheartedly. I think it's a systematic way of undermining working people, and I won't stand for it. I'll take a lead on it, and I will do that building a coalition of the organizations that I talked about in the previous question, getting you all involved in our community.
Thank you. Unions, I've said this time and again, are personal for me. We are a union household in my house. It's thanks to the fact that my husband relies on a union-based job that I was able to take a leave of absence from work. And even though we've had to make cuts in our budget at home, we certainly had to. But if it wasn't because we are blessed with a union job that my husband now relies on, we wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to focus on this campaign to the level that I need to be focused on without having to take this leave of absence. My mother was able to spread her wings when she joined SEIU's union to open up her own home daycare. I have personally benefited. My family has personally benefited from union being union members, and I would wholeheartedly support any initiative to expand. We've seen some really good progress in charter schools. Noble Charter Schools, I think, is leading the effort on unionizing teachers. But we also need to talk about, as we're asking them to be holding them accountable, talk about the equitable funding across the board for our teachers to be able to receive those types of benefits. Thank you.
Okay.
My point is, I would support it.
Next
I would
question.
obviously fight for it. Yes.
Good evening. There's been a lot of talk regarding the legalization of marijuana. One thing that isn't really being talked about is the upcoming Supreme Court case, Christie versus NCAA. If the Supreme Court sides with Christie, that would overturn the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act of 1992, which would allow other states to legalize sports gambling. So what is your stance on the potential legalization and regulation of sports gambling in Illinois.
Okay, everybody is silent up here. Can you believe it? Let's start in the middle with Delia.
Lucky me. Lucky me. I haven't taken a position on it, and I would love for you to educate me on the pros and cons on it. I just want to be completely quite honest with you.
You know what? I'm with Delia on this. I need to learn more about it. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of laws, and it's something that I'm sorry, I'm not completely familiar with. Like I said earlier, I'm not the smartest person in the room, so I would be happy to learn more about it.
So since Alyx is such a
I do love sports. I don't have time for them right now. No, I actually agree. I mean, I'd love to give you a better answer, but what you just educated me somewhat. Everybody in the world knows something I don't know, that's for sure, and I don't know enough to make an educated decision about it. I agree with the others. Sorry.
You'd be surprised. I too have not taken a position on that such specific issue. What I would like to just point out is that it is an important question. I think all of us at this table will take the time to educate ourselves a lot better on it, especially as we're having the conversation of alternative revenue sources here in Illinois, and that might be a potential avenue to look into, and whether or not it would be sensible for us to adopt. I'll tell you my position on gambling in general. I think we've seen some benefits across the state. In Chicago, we have a participating base that leaves our city to go spend their money on gambling outside of our city. And maybe and I haven't taken a stance on that either, but it does beg the question, is that something we should be visiting? This is gambling in general, not sports gambling. We're gonna learn more about that. But I think it begs the question to really rethink about as we're citing alternative revenue sources to fix our budget problems in Illinois. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Blake Garcia. I'm a Ukrainian village resident, and my question is regarding the progressive income tax that you all support. I support it too. I think it's a good idea, but it will take a constitutional amendment, and earliest estimates I think showed it won't. If everything's perfect, it won't happen until 2021. So with property taxes and utility taxes still rising in the interim, what ideas or proposals or legislation can you put forth in the interim to help middle-class families and individuals? Thank you.
That's what I've been saying. It's going to take some, and I agree. Why hasn't it been done 30 years earlier? You have to ask all the old people why they didn't take care of it earlier. They've been there forever. I don't know why. So I don't mean by age, but I meant like they've been there for a while. But one of the things that in the interim, obviously all of us are going to fight really hard for it, as hard as we can. But one thing that I had talked about earlier was to provide immediate relief for some of our poor middle-class working families is a sales tax deduction, right, off your income. So that, we put a cap on it, and it would be percentage. And so how that would work, I believe we can get that passed. I believe I can try to get that passed with bipartisan support, and that would provide an immediate $500 million in relief for a lot of our families, and hopefully to help offset a lot of the pain from the property taxes. And I already talked about earlier how we would make up that revenue by cutting at least 3 different tax breaks, as well as generating revenues such as legalizing marijuana and also service tax. Those are some of the things.
I hear it all the time at the doors, but I also hear it with the people that are volunteering with me, and I hear it in the nonprofits that I've ran and I've supported and I've served on boards. There's just no more that you can possibly take of people. We keep taking more, and then we take more. There's a gentleman I met at the doors last week who said to me, I used to pay $2,000 in property taxes. I'm at $12,000. Delia, I have a 2-flat. My daughter lives upstairs. I have no way of paying $200 more. That's why I'm cutting my pills in half. That's why I'm doing this, is why I'm doing that. But you know what? This summer, it's it. I'm moving to the Austin area or to another part of the city or maybe out of the city because I can't take it anymore. I mean, the bottom line is we should not wait till 2021. And we have to get rid of the people that have been sitting there. We have to get rid of them. These incumbents that have been sitting there have to go. That is why we are here today. The billionaires have to pay their fair share. Why are we paying the same amount that billionaires are paying? Teachers are paying the same thing. Seniors are paying the same thing. So what I'm saying is we need to be able to pass it, and I think we can pass it before 2021 if we have a progressive caucus and the right people in place.
So, Blake, as I understand even if we did pass it, getting it on, that then has to go to a ballot referendum. Then, I mean, there's a number of steps. The soonest it can come into fruition is 2021. I think there are some things we can do in the interim. Increase corporate income tax. I talked about that. We ought to make ourselves aligned with our neighboring states. And I'm just going to really quickly read it off to you. We are at 7%, and that is increased in the last 2 years, by the way. Indiana, 8.5. Wisconsin, 7.9. Minnesota, 9.8. Pennsylvania, 9.9. Our corporations are not paying their fair share. That's where we can start. And I think we can get pretty quick consensus on that. I do want to legalize marijuana. I think we do have pretty quick consensus on that. I would like to expand the sales tax to services, particularly luxury services. I'm not sure we could get quick consensus on that and quick passage of that, but I'd like to try. There has been something that's been talked about, and it has, as I've understood it, passed both houses, a millionaire's tax amendment. That also requires, it's an amendment, but it has passed both houses, and the problem was Bruce Rauner. So hopefully we can elect a new governor.
So thank you, Blake, for your question. Yeah, I mean, it's the alternative revenue sources that we've been bringing up here at the table that are certainly going to, I agree with Anne about the services tax on goods and services, the progressive income tax. We're so overdue. It is just simply necessary for us to go put ourselves as a state through the painstaking process of an amendment to the Constitution, but it is necessary. I think, too, we need to realize that just like we will ultimately be starting off asking those to pay, those better off, the well off, to pay their fair share, I think we should start seeing the benefits of having altered the moving away from the flat rate income tax structure that we're in, with those that were already paying lower, but that may have also been paying too much based on the whatever new rate we adopt. And so there's a hidden benefit there with the progressive income tax as well, that those whom should be getting a better break, even with the progressive income tax, will be getting their own fair share on the other end of the spectrum.
So we're
Thank
gonna
you.
do two more.
Good evening. My name is Justin Root. I am a resident of the district in Hermosa, and I'm also on the local school council for McAuliffe Elementary. So thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging us and letting us ask you questions. Quite simply, I wanted to know each of your positions on a statewide $15 minimum wage.
Can I start? Because I've been fighting for that and jumping on buses, and I've been organizing people for that for a very long time. I can't tell you that I support it. I mean, what I'm going to tell you is that I want to lead, and I have to lead on this. This is something that is very close to my heart. We can't talk about public safety. We can't talk about housing. We can't talk about health care if we don't talk about living wages. We have to talk about that at the forefront. And when people are underemployed and having to work 85 hours a week in the state of Illinois to be able to afford a one-bedroom, that is unacceptable. So I will not only support it, I will lead the same way that I've been leading for the last 2.5 years on this issue. We need living wages right now.
So, a mother of two making minimum wage today in Illinois. Illinois' minimum wage is living in poverty. And that is not a dignified life. That's if she's working 40 hours a week. I'm a full supporter of a $15 minimum wage, but we also need to think about how it's impacting us across our communities. I talked to someone who told me that their son is not doing well in school, in part because there's two reasons. First of all, she works 2 and 3 jobs, So he is taking care of and getting rid of ready his siblings for school in the morning. So he's late to school. So he's missing classes. And then he has to work at night also in order to help the mother take care of his younger siblings. So this is a child who has all the access to education or access to a Chicago public school education, but can't make it work because he's trying to help his mother raise his younger siblings. That's a problem. We have to help people. We have to pass a minimum $15 minimum wage as soon as possible to help families and people live in dignity.
Thank you. I can speak to Alyx's example very personally. I was that child growing up, being the eldest of four. My siblings are here tonight, helping my family make ends meet. I would have been proud to have been a housekeeper or factory worker like my parents were, but government worked in my favor, and I was afforded the opportunity to have access to health care, SNAP benefits, especially when I had my daughter just as a sophomore in college. But you're right, Alyx. We couldn't make ends meet growing up in my family, and if it was, it was the children that were kept from being able to be involved in after-school programs, tutoring programs, and support services that were crucial to their own development. And thankfully, like I said, government was there to see me through and be here before you running for office today. But the statistics are real, and I wholeheartedly, to answer your question, support a $15 minimum wage, and I would hope to see families like mine have a better chance at life. Thank you.
Hi.
So not only do I support a $15 minimum wage, I want to make sure that we give our people real opportunities. The state of Illinois has a big shortage. This is actually across the country of high-skilled labor. So I've been able to visit with groups, work with groups, and work on creating mentorship programs and jobs training programs so that people can have not just a living wage, of course that's a minimum, that's bare minimum, but also like a job, a career that they can feel proud of, that they can raise their family on, send them to school. I mean, you know, there's such a great shortage on that, and I want to make sure that we have funding to expand those programs, because for every dollar we spend on those programs, we get $7 back. So it's not really just about expanding wages, but it makes fiscal sense for our state. It lifts everybody in the state, including everybody's wages. So absolutely, I not only support it, but I want to see more. So thank you for that question.
No, sorry, Ms. Shaw. Hi, I'm a teacher, actually a charter school teacher, so thank you all for stating that you support our efforts to unionize. My question, though, is about gentrification, because this is a problem that is facing many of my students and their families. And specifically, actually, my question is for Ms. Millan, because I noticed on Illinois Sunshine that you're receiving a large amount of money from Joe Moreno and developers who are contributing to making this neighborhood unaffordable. And so I want to know from you and from all of you, how will you hold developers accountable and keep our families from being displaced?
Thank you for your question, and thank you. I appreciate that. No, look, gentrification is certainly a loaded term. We've grown up in my family grew up in the Logan Square community and the Hermosa community. Now we're raising our two children here in the Humboldt Park neighborhoods. We've seen it all. My in-laws, one of them whom is here tonight, have lived in the building we live in now for the past 40 years. And I understand from the ground up in my own family the impact of that. But I think to answer your question about the benefits and the disadvantages of it is it's development, that's the trick about gentrification, that development is always perceived as a negative, and it's either development or non-development. Development needs to happen in order, we had the conversation of property taxes. When you think about raising property taxes, that's where I see the benefit of continuing development. I would welcome development, and especially running in a district where it's so diverse in that sense. And I want to answer this question. I was directly targeted for this, and I think that development is crucial in order to keep those property taxes down. Because when you're not developing and expanding those types of development, then you're raising people's taxes. And ultimately, I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
We're just going in order. So the way you phrased your question was interesting to me. You said hold developers accountable. I actually think we should be holding aldermen accountable. So if you think about who's taken the money from the developers and who's got the power to actually decide at the local level where development is going, how quickly it happens, how we need to be paying attention to aldermen. And when I talk about organizing in our community and organizing around this issue, I am specifically talking about doing some of that too. When I talk about organizing outside of the ward organizations, all of you hopefully getting involved, I am specifically talking about that too. So we have to be paying attention to how people are being displaced in our communities. And you know, now that it is already happening, that is a fact. It has started to happen. We in Springfield can do some things about it. The first thing I'd like to start with, if I'm there, is passing a rent control bill. Will Guzzardi has a one-sentence bill, and what it will allow is municipalities, like the city council, to take up the issue of rent control. And again, we must hold our aldermen accountable on that. I'd love to see them debate that and see where they come out, because I think it's the right thing to do for our communities.
I was going to give you the honor. So that is what I've been fighting against my entire life. I used to run a homeless service agency, and now that organization is a citywide organization that works with people from homelessness to homeownership. And every time we talk about homeownership, either be at Lucha, where they do homeownership counseling and they provide affordable rentals, or Center for Changing Lives, which is thriving as one of the nationally recognized organizations providing financial and housing counseling, is where are people going to live? Wells High School, not too far from here, has about 400, 500 students in a school of 1,500 capacity. You cannot talk about stable housing without talking about stable schools, and you can't talk about stable schools without talking about stable housing. We are under attack. What I think you were referring to was balanced development. Yeah, we need balanced development, and we need it now. The problem is not balanced at the moment. Right now, it's all about developers. I made a commitment that I would not take money from any developer. I'm going to honor that commitment, because at the end of the day, as I'm knocking on doors left and right, all I see is big rises down 606. We need property tax relief for people in that area. We need to make sure that we're holding set-asides like the Sweet Home Chicago that I fought for, and we need to make sure that the people that live here and have lived here for 47 years can stay here. This is why I will champion at the state level property tax relief for zones for people that have lived here for 5 or 10 years. It is incredibly important. My family's been on the same corner, and we're about to have to make decisions because of this.
So many of us over here have actually have seen a lot of the major shifts and changes, the loss of many of our old-time neighbors because something called mass evictions from the results of property taxes. And, you know, unfortunately, some of my colleagues here have either stated publicly in former debates that they think that development issues should be decided by the aldermen. So I find it interesting that they have a different opinion tonight. And then my other opponent, who I actually do respect quite a bit, you know, has taken $10,000 from Alderman Maldonado, who's done a lot of the suffering along the 606. I mean, I think somebody posted on Facebook his home. I think it's like 3 city lots. It's like a mansion, and it doesn't, right? Yeah, and it doesn't even fit with the community. And I can tell you, and I don't want to say names, but there are people who live on that block who, you know, we just stand there like this, like, ain't that something else? So I got to tell you, if you really want to talk about affordable housing issues, we really need to look at outside the box. We need to come up with some ideas that really help the people, right? And a lot of that, and I've actually studied things like how did places like Detroit, the city of Chicago has a ton of vacant lots, okay? And that we can actually help build wealth for communities who have been traditionally discriminated against or redlined through a system of discrimination, like for the African American community and the Hispanic community, where they couldn't get home loans and they couldn't buy properties. So, okay, I'm time, sorry.
And our county assessor is also a problem. We need to get rid of the county assessor.
Okay, so I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I want to tell you that if you go to our Urban Times, there's already a story up there, if you haven't read it, that tells you, that's a slight plug, okay. That tells you what the job of a state rep is supposed to be. It mentions Illinois Sunshine, gives you some links there. There will be another story going up. I interviewed these ladies, gave them a set of questions, which will go up, maybe not tonight, but and, oh, thank you. Lynn just reminded me that the 4 organizations, CGNA, EVA, UBNA, and Westbound, are going to have a meet and greet. So it's not like this, but it's meet your various candidates for various offices, not just this one. And it's going to be at Bruce at 6:30, do I recall, on March 12th. Okay. So, thank you so much for coming.